started to record. And then before Ethan kicks it off, just a warm welcome to our two newest panel members, Ariar Tamadi and Kelly Hollenbeck, who are joining us, joining the panel. And this is their very first meeting. We're super excited to have them here. So thank you for joining us. Thanks for being here. We look forward to a productive evening. So with that, I'm going to kick it off to Ethan to officially start the meeting.
Okay, good evening, everybody. This meeting for the Design Advisory Panel will cover one application today for 10010 Junction Drive. The Design Advisory Panel, for those of you who haven't been before, is a panel that that offers design advice to the Planning Department for Howard County. We do not have jurisdiction over the designs, and there will be no public commentary in this presentation. We'll go around the room and introduce ourselves as a panel and include Anthony and Nick from the Planning Department in introductions, and then turn it over to the applicant to run through a brief presentation of their submitted materials. Nick forwarded a recent package that has been further developed from the application that was sent out within the past week. So assume we'll be looking at that, and everybody should have that on their desktops as well as presentation. So without further ado, my name is Ethan Marchant. I'm an architect, and I'll just call out names, I guess, as we go through. So Kelly.
Hi, Kelly Hollenbeck. I'm an architect as well.
Sharahar. I think you're muted.
Muted.
Right, I am muted. I'm Shahryar Etemadi, planner, engineer.
And Dan.
Dan Lovett, civil engineer.
Okay, so if we turn it over to the applicant, if you could do your introductions and then proceed directly into your presentation. I assume one of you is sharing the screen.
Thank you, Ethan. Hello and good evening, good afternoon. My name is Michael Paranunzi. I'm a registered landscape architect with Century Engineering. I'm here representing the owners, the contract purchasers, which is Obrecht Commercial Real Estate and Grander Capital Partners. Tonight with me, I've got Dave Marcuzzi. He's with CE Design. And Lydia Bacara is also with our team. She works at Century Engineering as well. So our game plan was to run through the presentation that you have in front of you, and then welcome your discussion at the end of the meeting. I'd like to start off with the fact that we have properly posted the site. We've notified the adjacent owners. We've gone through we've worked with Nick and his department on the proper procedures for this meeting. We previously held a community meeting that was at the local elementary school, and we've submitted an ECP. So we are now at the DAP process and going through the Howard County process for a project such as this. Lydia. Thanks, Lydia. I think you can go to the next one. So this is a project description. It was a combination of David and myself putting this together. So I'm going to hit a couple highlights, and then obviously David will get into some architectural highlights. But this property is a redevelopment of 110 Junction Drive. It's a new construction for 2 multifamily buildings. They're going to consist of 650 apartment units. It's in alignment, with the revitalization of the Route 1 corridor. We're following the Route 1 corridor manual. It's currently zoned TOD, Transit Oriented Design.
In that way, so I did the beat on screen.
If you want to mute them. And then currently the site has an existing office building on the property. We're going to raise that building and propose a new experience with these new buildings. Excited to show it to you. It's a 7-acre parcel. We're going to subdivide that parcel into 2 parcels. They'll both be about 3.5 acres each, with the building and associated parking on each one. So Lydia, if you could go to the next slide for me, and we'll come back to this one if you don't mind. So overall, and Lydia, maybe use your cursor. Our site is the red parcel that's in the middle of the property. To our east is the existing MARC station and the existing development that has occurred over there. It's a very vibrant new property that contains a shopping, retail, mixed-use center and residential parcel. To the south is the CSX railroad tracks. To the west is a stormwater management facility that treats the Junction Industrial Park, which is to our north and to our west. So as you can see, there's a very thin line, and Lydia, maybe you could trace that, that shows the TOD zoning, the transit-oriented design zoning line. And so this property falls within the TOD and obviously is directly adjacent to the MARC train station stop, which is shown in a blue dot right across the street from us, and a bus stop right on the roadway just north of us. Yes, right there. Thank you, Lydia. And then maybe we could get to next, if we go back a slide. Now we've zoomed into the site a little bit more so you can see our property. It has 2 access points off of Junction Drive. It's currently, improved with an existing office building and parking lot. To the right, on page right, which for us is east, as mentioned, is that MARC commuter station and Dorsey Run Road. The MARC commuter station is within walking distance from our site. There is an existing lighted and pedestrian safe crossing across Dorsey Run Road for these users of the industrial park and of this parcel to get to the MARC station. To the north of us is obviously the additional Junction Drive industrial buildings. And to the west, you can see is the stormwater management facility parcel that treats not only our parcel, but also other buildings within the property. And to the south is the CSX railroad track, and it's about 10 to 15 feet lower than our site. One last point, you can see there's a large parking deck on the opposite side of Dorsey Run Road, and that is directly to our east. Maybe go 2 slides now, Lydia. So I just wanted to give everybody just a very quick tour of the site. The existing site, as mentioned, is improved with an existing office building. It is 2 to 3 story tall, and it is you'll see the property has some buffers around it that are planted with white pines and pin oaks and maple trees. The majority of the site, in the picture to the right, is parking lot serving the building, and maybe down on the bottom middle picture you can see how the railroad tracks are at the back of our property and below our property as well. And to the right is the lower right picture shows the residential property that's built across the street of Dorsey Run and the existing sidewalk that leads to the safe crossing across the roadway. With that, I believe I'm going to turn it over to David.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. As Mike said, Dave Marcosi with CI Design, the architecture for the project. Before I dive into this slide, I actually wanted to go back a little bit. You can stay on this slide, but wanted to continue some of the project descriptions and continue to paint a picture for you all as you see the forthcoming slides. But just generally speaking, as you'll see, fronting the project site, there'll be a public amenity park with open green spaces, encouraging and promoting extracurricular activity with public benches, street furniture, site lighting. All site program components and landscape experiences, as Mike said, are designed to support the Route 1 public bike and sidewalk share program. Will be provided with 8-foot wide circulation paths that will connect the project to the public realm and adjacent sites as well. Furthermore, encouraging the use of the public transit system, as Mike introduced. Internal to the site will be a Muse style corridor open to the public for leisure extracurricular activities and continuing circulation and connectivity. Everything within the site has been designed to provide a pedestrian scale living experience and community interaction. The new buildings that you'll be seeing in the rest of these slides will be 4-story wood framed, each wrapping a structured parking deck. The project will contain market comparable interior amenities with outdoor pool and courtyard experiences. The buildings will continue to be designed and will comply with sustainable practices, proposing materials that will align with the market and include brick and fiber cement panels. The design does introduce a fairly common base middle top concept recommended by the Route 1 guidelines and contains iconic corners of the buildings, highlighting architectural hierarchy and identifying entry and program. Architectural rhythms will continue throughout the building, and you'll see these on the elevations, linking the two buildings with a complementary architectural palette. So this first slide, diving into a little bit of the presentation now here, the planning for the site. Well, we looked at options to get the desired program of 650 units, parking the required 2.3 spaces per unit, which would equivalent to just under 1,500 spaces total. In doing so, we've looked at several options below, showing a few of those. The top two schemes show the idea of one large building wrapping a structured parking garage, and the bottom two schemes breaking up the program with two separate independent buildings, where the option to the bottom left shows 5 stories of wood frame over a concrete podium, and to the bottom right would be a 5-story of wood wrapping structured parking. We did decide to move forward with that last option that you see off to the bottom right and develop it a little further. Lydia, if you can go to the next slide. So the site plan shows an overview where we landed, providing the required public amenity area, which we feel works nicely with as you enter into the site, flanking both sides of landscaped experiences. That's coming right off the Junction Drive. You can highlight that with your cursor if you don't mind. Then we continued that experience through the site with a central Muse that runs between the two buildings, continuing to a roundabout that allows for proper fire truck turnaround diameters. Each building would have its own independent courtyard space that would be dedicated to residents only. Overall, the intentions with the kind of the layout and the planning was to get the exterior public amenity area up front and in the foreground of the project. And then I'm going to have Mike come back in later and kind of do a little bit more of the presentation and dive a bit more into the landscape as we continue. Lydia, you want to go next slide? So we have a series of diagrams. I want to just kind of continue to give you a little bit of background with this site. So with the two independent buildings, we broke the site into, as Mike said, 2 3.5 acre lots, plus or minus. We do provide a 10-foot setback and use along Junction Drive to the north of the site. And as Mike explained, and we'll also be keeping the utility easements that exist off to the east of the site and to the south of the site. Go ahead, Lydia, to the next slide. So for Lot 1 specifically, the diagramming here on the left, we're continuing to just provide just under 40% of the allowable 50% of the developable acreage for the residential use shown in green. The diagram to the right shows 10.4% of the minimum 10% required space, which would be dedicated to public exterior amenity area. And I also wanted to note that we're continuing the 8-foot bike walk path required in the Route 1 manual throughout the interior of the site, again, encouraging and making public connectivity and fluid experience. And you can kind of see that represented in the diagrams with the orange trails that are pretty consistent with fluid. Next slide, Lydia. Same set of diagrams for Lot 2 with the residential use coming in at 37.2% of the allowable 50%, and public amenity area falling just at the required 10%. Public amenity area shown in the pink area to the left, and then building 2 residential areas in the diagram to the right with the yellow area. It's a residential portion. Go to the next slide, Lydia. So diving in a bit more, this is how we laid out the buildings themselves with amenity and lobby program and experiences shown in pink, working in conjunction with other apparent and working with an apparent experience as you enter the site. Building 1 shown in green represents 330 units and 810 spaces. And building 2 shown in yellow shows 320 units and 735 parking spaces, altogether totaling the 650 unit program and slightly over 1,500 parking spaces. We've shown loading and service spaces tucked away in the back of each building to not be apparent, visible, and visible to the public realm. Next slide, Lydia. Just a few clarifying massing diagrams. The first at the top left, showing our intentions of separating the existing parcel into 2 lots. The second diagram to the top right, representing vehicular circulation, post shade in yellow, and pedestrian circulation shown with orange dots. Now it might be a little hard to see, but it can zoom in if we needed to. To the bottom left, just an overall massing of the 5-story buildings. And to the bottom right diagram, highlighting amenity spaces for the project where the yellow is private exterior courtyard space, pink is interior amenity space, and green is exterior public amenity space. Next slide, Lydia. Diving right into some of the section study and height. So the section shows the overall building height for building 1, which is off to the left in green at 59 foot 4 inches, and building 2 to the right at 54 foot 4 inches. And those are taking from each lot's average grade, ultimately staying under the 60-foot mark for both buildings. Next slide, Lydia. All right. The fun stuff. So dive into some elevations. Consistently throughout the project, we focused on 2 contrasting brick colors of red and charcoal, and complementary fiber cement colors as tones of gray, with hierarchy of corners promoting massing elements, utilizing a nice soft wood grain fiber cement panel. The top rendering is of the Muse elevation of building 1, where you see the main lobby at the right with the hierarchical corner experience, following a series of units using massing to help break down the base, middle, and top, carefully articulating the architecture for the parking garage, which is off to a little bit further to the left. So it relates to the overall elevation. We did attempt to provide some good attention to that, so it kind of was very fluid with materiality and massing along that elevation. The bottom elevation also shows same lobby at the left of with the balance of the elevations of units. Next slide, video. Continuing with the same material and overall concept around the rest of the building 1, again with massing hierarchy at the corners, grounding the buildings with iconic bases. The top elevation is building 1 along Junction Drive specifically, again, you'll see where you'll be experiencing the pedestrian bike and walk path with healthy landscaping and vibrant circulation experiences at that edge. And the bottom elevation, some architectural language of units that will overlook the open stormwater management area to the west of the project. And just so y'all, if you haven't seen it, we have a little key plan off to the bottom right of each of these sheets, so you can help orient yourself. Next slide, Lydia. Building 2 is composed of the same material palette and similar conceptual massing approaches with anchored corners and base, middle, top breakdown similarly throughout the project. The top elevation is facing the central Muse, and the bottom elevation would face the open site to the west, the stormwater management area to the west. Just give everybody a minute to absorb the elevation. All right, next slide, Lydia. And the final slide of elevations, where the top rendering shows the north elevation along the south edge of the site, and the bottom elevation where we would have an exposed parking garage, and this happens off to the east side of the site, along the Dorsey Run Road. There is a buffer of trees that happen between Dorsey Run and the building, and on the other side of Dorsey Run, where Mike had explained, is the commuter parking lot, which also has a similarly exposed precast garage. Next slide, Lydia. So before Mike takes it over and dives in a little bit more in detail, we have a couple perspective renderings. The first looking south into the project from the intersection of Junction Drive and Corridor Road. You can see how we have our hierarchical corner expressions with the soft wooden fiber cement paneling system, and consistently we'll see the base, middle, top expression of the architecture. And again, the red, orangish red material is represented with the brick, and there's also some hierarchy and elements of contrasting charcoal brick that you'll see on the perspectives as well. In the foreground, you'll see the public amenity space. So again, as you enter in off of Junction Drive, you're confronted with some nice green experiences open to those who wish to indulge in the exterior experiences. Next slide, Lydia. This is a view of the internal central Muse, we're calling it, looking east toward that park. As you enter in, this is kind of where the corner that you'll be presented with. We have building 1 off to the left, building 1 is off to the right. You can see just beyond some of the trees there to the left is where the lobby and amenity space would be for building 1. And you can see to the right there is a canopy extension identifying the program and entry to the lobby and amenities for building 2. So you're really getting down into some pedestrian detail and introducing a nice corridor and views area for the residents to experience. Next slide, Lydia. And this final perspective view is along Junction Drive, looking east toward Dorsey Run Road. Again, this is where we'll be introducing the Route 1 8-foot wide public shared bike and walk path. Again, heavy and healthy landscaping along those edges, and introducing a nice kind of circular connectivity of pedestrian circulation. Again, these pedestrian circulation paths along the public realm do connect throughout the project, and also to the mass transit systems on the adjacent properties. Next slide, and I will give the floor back to Mike. You can continue to go through the rest of the site there, Mike.
Yeah, Lydia, you can go back to the rendering. Yes. So I was just continuing on. It's a good transition, as David mentioned, the connectivity of the pedestrian walkways and how they not only connect, as I mentioned, across the street to the MARC station, across a lighted and pedestrian signalized intersection, but also within our site, up in the upper right-hand corner, obviously an amenity area, park-like effect. That's up in the northeast corner, continuing the pedestrian linkage into the site, and that Muse that's going to occur between the buildings with special paving and a sidewalk system that potentially could be used as an amenity for the interior of the units. We'll have hardscaping and landscaping in the open space areas. We feel that they're, probably a little bit more passive in this setting, but certainly can be used as an area that can be used to get outdoors. And so the next slides, I might hit a couple technical slides and then maybe get into some of the landscape and hardscape. So as we know, the site already has an existing building, existing parking lots, and so it has existing utilities that serve the site. So there's existing public water and sewer that serves this parcel. The site currently drains to the left to the existing stormwater management that treats obviously the quantity management. We'll be doing some redevelopment stormwater management requirements to address the stormwater management for the proposed impervious area that's on the site by treating that with a combination of some rooftop disconnects. We'll be using some what we call structured stormwater management facilities and a few microbial retention facilities. The next slide is a little difficult to read, but the point of the slide is it is a grading plan. So in general, the property slopes from the upper left or the north west to the lower right, which is northeast. And there's about a 8-foot grade change between the two. We're obviously going to site the buildings and provide a ADA compliant project through the middle of the site and catch grade with the building as required. And one last point on the grades, that railroad track, as mentioned, is a good 12 to 15 feet below our site as it passes by. So the next slide is just, general site amenities that we're looking for. We were talking about these pocket parks and site amenities, just the parks to provide, some public spaces with some hardscape and landscape elements, special paving, benches, lighting. We haven't, finalized that design yet, but that is the intent of the design, of course. So I think the next slide shows some images of certainly, some design parameters that we could use, having some kind of parks that would provide a respite, a muse, a linear pathway through the two buildings, just some areas to pull off and have a nook to get outside, I would say, in reference to these buildings. And there's also going to be interior amenities as well, as David mentioned on his slides earlier. We're going to be using, next slide, we'll be using some landscape elements, of course, to provide shade, provide color, provide texture. We're going to be using some planters as required, but in general, the property will certainly be able to take advantage of the areas that are shown and highlight the Route 1 corridor and the pedestrian linkages that we've been talking about, and use that special pavers to direct the pedestrian flow through the site safely. And I believe that was it. Again, the owners, which are Obrecht and Grander Capital, are happy, with this parcel, and we're opening it up to any questions.
Well, thank you very much for an excellent presentation, very thorough. I'd like to hand it over to Nick from the planning department to address their comments before we go into the panel's conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Marchant. For everybody who doesn't know, my name is Nicholas Haynes. I work for the Department of Planning and Zoning. I help facilitate DAP reviews. here at the county. I think the design team, they did a very good job explaining, the proposal for the sort of expansion of the sort of Annapolis Junction project that the panel actually last saw mid-April of last year, um, which included the revisions to the garages and the two residential buildings and hotel that they had immediately on the opposite side of Dorsey Road. This project is zone TOD, so transit-oriented development, which is, very design-centric. Hopefully to utilize and take advantage of the MARC commuter station that's immediately across Dorsey Run Road, on the southern side of the existing garage that the panel has seen. The site's roughly 7.08 acres, as as the applicants have mentioned, and it's roughly flat as it stands today, with minor grade changes from one side to the other. The planning and zoning, we'd like the panel to please evaluate and make recommendations on the orientation, layout, and configuration of the proposed site plan. Do the two new buildings fit within the context of the existing Annapolis Junction design? In the surrounding area, are there perhaps design elements or cues that maybe that the applicants have overlooked, or maybe something that could enhance those connections? You could also make recommendations on the proposed open space, streetscape, and amenity space. Being that this is transit-oriented development, the pedestrian connections and stuff, are obviously very important, given the very close proximity to the neighboring, MARC station. So are there any, maybe relationships or some, other elements that they should maybe consider to enhance those, those elements and pedestrian connections? Because it's a very important aspect of the site. And then any recommendations for updates to the the proposed structures themselves? I realize a lot of the the proposed materials and stuff they used, I think they're generally trying to fit within that architectural context of the surrounding buildings, but maybe there's something that they haven't thought of that could maybe provide some additional interest and longevity to these structures moving forward. So we'd greatly appreciate any input that you would have.
Well, thanks, Nick. Maybe we frame the conversation starting with the site development, civil landscape planning aspects, and work from the large scale to the smaller scale. So I'll let Dan or Bob take it to start off, and then we can end up with the architecture.
And this is Mike. If you need Lydia to go to any slide, just please let us know.
I guess this is Dan Lovett or Larry, unless you want to go first.
No, go ahead, Dan. I'll follow you or Bob.
Yeah, just the one thing from the landscaping I would have really liked to have seen is just more planting and maybe a trail going around the perimeter of the entire site would be kind of a nice little thing, instead of these tiny little parks that no one can really get any kind of exercise in them. They're not very big. I'd rather see less of that, tiny ones in the middle and in the northeast. I'd rather see a wider perimeter going around where you could put a trail and put trees. I thought would be a nice touch, but that's just me personally. We talked about.
Excuse me, can we have that slide on instead of this? Thank you. The main slide. The main slide for that shows the other, go back.
Lydia, go to the rendering.
Yes,
That
this one. Okay, so at least we can. Okay. Oops. If you go back. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And that way it's a nice
Dan.
loop, and you can actually get a decent walk going around it, where these tiny little trails in here, I don't know. I don't see really anybody out there walking them that much. if I was going to go outside and walk, I'd like to do a nice long walk, but that's just me. But I understand that cuts down on space. So
Half these people are going to have dogs. There needs to be, I agree with Dan, there needs to be some kind of gesture towards some sort of perimeter walkway or something. Do you have a landscape plan?
At this time, we have a conceptual landscape plan, Bob. Right. So we are just, as I mentioned in the beginning, we, you know, our next step is to come in with the sketch plan. We've done a community meeting and an ECP. So that is going to be further refined off of this rendering.
I mean, you had not a lot of nice pictures of the Muse, but in your renderings of the Muse, you don't show any street trees there. Is that your intent to have street trees? That's not the Muse. That's the Muse.
Yes, Bob. Yeah, our intention is to have street trees along here, and that's something that we'll be developing. There might be, you know, instead of having like a green space along the edge as we work with Mike and the landscape team, there may be some graded experiences for street trees, but I'll let Mike to talk to that. But you know, I think that street trees would be nice here.
Yeah, I think you know, just in general, we need to have landscape plans with these submissions. The renderings are nice, but they're all blue sky and you know, kids with balloons. You know, we need to know what you're really going to do.
I totally agree. Yes.
Okay, that was just one thing that got my attention. The other one is, do you know if what is the increase in the traffic from the existing site to this new site? Do we know how much more traffic is going to be coming onto Junction Drive? Because from, what is it? The first road until you get over to Dorset Corridor Road and Dorsey Road, it looks like there's always a lot of cars backed up there. So if you're going to have an increase, you may want to think about what your impact is going to be onto Junction Drive, because people are going to get upset if it's hard for them to get out.
Yeah, this is Mike. You know, obviously the traffic comes with that next step, that sketch plan. So we're in the process of getting that traffic done and anxious for those numbers. And then, yeah, currently there is, you know, there's parking in front of this in front of this site. There's just people parking there that we'll have to control.
Okay, those are the two biggest things that I saw, guys. That's enough for me.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is Larry Quark. I joined late because I was having trouble logging in, but I'm a landscape architect. And so I just follow up on some of the things that Dan said, and then Bob had some comments. I did want to ask, the 8-foot trail connection that you talked about, are there other sections of that bike trail already in place, or are you just building your section with the idea that it will connect into other trails that would be required for other developers?
So currently today, there's an existing sidewalk, and Lydia, maybe you could show that with your cursor, that goes to that. So you're right. Currently today, there's an existing pathway system, the sidewalk there that goes to that lighted and controlled, pedestrian controlled intersection across Dorsey Run Road to the MARC station. We are doing it along our frontage, and your second point was correct, that it's just tied into the sidewalk system that does loop around the industrial drive, Junction Drive, I should say.
Okay. And then since we're on that, I like this slide because it's a good talking point, but the mature trees that are shown there, are those trees that are going to remain, or are those planted trees to the north of the bike trail?
So those are existing trees that, as we get into the detailed grading of the design and the improvements of the building, they are, you know, shown along the edge of the roadway system. Our goal is to save those. It's a bunch of they're pin oaks that are about probably 8 to 10 inches in diameter breast height, I'd say.
Okay, so they're definitely worth saving. Just make sure, and this is way in the future.
And there's pine trees there and pines there too that are.
Well, in any case, because they're fairly mature, just make sure there's tree protection in the future. Otherwise, they'll die. A couple years after you're done with construction, and you need to stay away from the critical root zone, which is basically the canopy of the tree. So. Then I guess you're not required to do any street tree planting along Dorsey Run Road because you don't have control of that little strip of land. I'm not sure who owns that, an HOA or what, or is it county land? Yeah, there.
So it's actually, yes, that's a right of way, and those are existing trees, Larry, that are going to stay and use as a buffer between ourselves and the roadway system. So we don't own it, to be honest with you.
Okay. Let's go to the park then. I think it's a real critical area. It's the gateway to your complex, and I like how it continues with the Muse. But and you don't have many details there, and I realize you said that, and you did show examples of street furniture and things and lights, which is nice. Those things looks like they'll fit in, and your specialty pavings are certainly important. But I would encourage you to maybe look at that park to see if you can do more than just like seating areas. Sometimes I'm not even sure the size of that park. I know you only have 7 acres there, and that looks relatively small. But I'm just throwing out things like maybe a small water feature. Sometimes they can be designed where people can actually partake in them during certain times of the year, where it's just a shallow sort of bubblers that come up. I point to Colorburst Park in Symphony or in the Meriwether district in Columbia. They have that type of thing. And also maybe a small lawn area with all these people. There's going to be some younger children, I'm sure, and be nice to have a lawn area where you can throw a frisbee or pass ball or something like that, because I'm not even sure how close the closest county park is to this. It's not within the immediate area. But anyway, so that type of grassy sort of play area. Think about the pavings in that area. I mean, there might be an area where the paved area could be kind of a trike bike, like a tricycle, lane for smaller kids to use. Things like shuffleboard or a bocce court, things that young couples like to use, and could possibly be there. Or you may be putting them in your central atriums, But again, think of it as a whole package. If that is a public park, it would be better to have something that attracts people rather than just seating areas, which is nice. But if you have other things in there, I think that would go a long ways to making that a really, fun space and still a gateway to your area. Children's play area. It doesn't have to be the traditional ones. There's many that are like sculptural in nature, where it might be, I don't know, the form of a bird or something like that, that's sculptural, but yet kids can play on it. So again, I encourage you to have some sort of more active recreation in that amenity park, rather than, just a trail and some plantings. I think that can all be integrated in with it, but I would encourage you to consider some sort of active recreation. I wanted to also ask about the Muse. I wasn't sure what you meant by that and the description. It does look like a nice internal pedestrian street, and you are having specialty pavers there. Bob and Dan had mentioned about street trees. It would be nice. I mean, you may even have to lose some of the parallel spacing parking there in order to have sort of bump outs where trees could be. And again, I encourage you, if you're looking to supplement your stormwater management plan, those areas, the trees could be within sort of depressed areas that are like bio swells. Again, I point to the Meriwether district. There's so many great examples of these bio swells that have native plantings along them, and you can even interpret them. Have little signs in there about what native trees and perennials are in there. It just becomes kind of an educational area for people, and you've got the benches along that are ready. So I think that could be a really neat internal area. Also an area, if you plan ahead, is like sometimes it's really popular to bring food trucks in. That could be a really great area to have that set up for specialty events during the summer. So I just don't underestimate how wonderful that space could be, and not just a place for parking. And then that leads me to my last one is, where do guests park? I mean, is there street parking? Is it going to be just along the Muse or in that front area? Because with 600, there's going to be, guests, coming in. And I know for myself, I have a niece and nephew that live in Arlington, and there's absolutely no place to park, there unless you find street parking. So could you address that as to how you're providing parking for the tenants versus their guests?
Yeah, I can take that, Mike. So there is some street parking that happens as you enter in. You kind of see some of those parallel or perpendicular spots there. Along the Muse, there will be a parallel parking that happens along there as well. And then any additional parking would be taken care of within the parking garages themselves.
Okay. And then if you are parking in the Muse, is the Muse as it comes to that sharp left and leads to that cul-de-sac, that is for people to turn around, right? It's not just for delivery trucks or whatever.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then another question related to parking is, and we've been asking this question when we see these large condo complexes or apartments, where is the delivery drop-off areas? With 600 people, you've got FedEx trucks, Grubhub, UPS, Amazon, all coming in to drop off things, and it can become a nightmare. I think several of us have commented, just live on short streets here in residential areas in the suburbs, and it becomes, pretty busy. So I just wanted to know how you're addressing that, just so that there's no congestion or jam ups.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very sensitive, and it's good that you brought it up. So any heavy loading and residents in and out on building 1, we're actually have the loading and service happening at the bottom left. You can see where you're just where Lydia's showing her cursor right there.
Right.
And then smaller FedEx trucks or small package deliveries, there would be, we would probably envision a drop-off or a temporary parking location up at front closer to the lobby so that those deliveries can come in and go right back out. Same thing with mail delivery. For building 2, right where Lydia's cursor is right there in the back, there's a little, you can see right off of the turnaround. I'm sorry, that's my cursor. Lydia, right there, that's where we envision kind of the loading to happen for building 2. Any major loading or a resident move-in. So again, it's tucked away, farthest away from any kind of public experience. And the same situation would happen for mail delivery or smaller packages would happen along the front where the lobby is.
Okay, just as long as you realize that the parking you show there is great, but some of that may have to go in order to accommodate these sort of staging areas with multiple trucks, arriving at the same time. So don't discount the importance of that, because it could be a real nightmare in a small parking lot like that. And with that, I don't have any other comments. I think I've covered everything. I think I'll turn it over to the architects so they can comment on the building design and structure. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. This is Ethan again.
Actually,
Because
I'm sorry.
I-
I'm sorry. I have a few questions regarding landscaping, access, sidewalks, all of that. So, if I may. I'm Shahriar Etemadi. I'm new in this, actually new first time. So I may ask questions that may not be correct or appropriate. The first thing I'm sure you have thought about the noise mitigation. How do you do that? What are you're sitting next to the railroad, so
I got that, Mike. So yeah, there will be some sound studies that we'll have to do specifically for decibel studies for the windows along that edge. That's definitely something that we'll dive into specifically. Do keep in mind that the train is 12 foot or so below that, so that will help mitigate some of the noise sound. But there will definitely be some studies that will be done for penetration of sound.
okay. So the study is going to be submitted with your application and with a review process, I suppose.
Mike, I'm not sure what the
yeah,
process
I'm wondering.
is when we
Yes,
submit
sir.
those.
Yeah, I would think a comment came from I'm not sure if it's part of a checklist requirement or not, depending on its proximity, but certainly we'll be working with planning and zoning. And if
So
that,
so you are basically making a commitment to do a noise study and submit that to the planning and zoning?
again, we'll go through the standard process that's required, and
So,
I believe that'll be
I
fleshed out
understand.
in the
No,
next
I'm
step.
sorry, Mike, but I understand the process and I understand the standards, but I'm saying that one of your colleagues just said that we are going to do a study. I'm asking specifically if you're committing to that and providing that, or you just don't want to answer that.
If I may interject here, I don't believe that's in our jurisdiction to require that type of study. So it's a very valid.
It's not part of your design standards.
It's not part of the design advisory panel's charge to get into those type of studies. It's a very valid concern, and I think it's a study that needs to be done. But we certainly can't create requirements for the applicant that are outside of the standard checklist process.
Okay, so the county does not have any requirements for noise study when you're sitting next to the railroad station?
Again, I think the question is, we'll go through
Actually,
that process,
yeah.
and the county will review our next step, which is the sketch plan. And at that time, we will, and then we'll go through the site development plan. So we have 2 more steps to go through with planning and zoning.
I understand. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next one. What is the width? Well, first of all, I think when you're providing this kind of information beside the landscape plan, I think you should show the cross sections at these roadways along your frontage so we can understand what is the width of, for example, the green panel between the sidewalk and the edge of the road. Do you know what that is?
Yeah, we certainly have that in CAD, and I think some of the graphics that were on the earlier sections with David had cut some site sections through the plan that showed those widths at this time.
Okay, so is sufficient spacing, you can plant trees and have a good spacing between the sidewalk and the edge of the road. So the sidewalks or bike path or shared use path that you're showing along Junction Drive is 8 feet wide. Is that what the minimum requirements is for this area?
That is the requirement of the Route 1 manual to have an 8 foot wide.
All right, so is a shared use path basically is for sidewalk and bike path, right?
Correct.
Usually I think a good standard is for 10 feet wide, but I leave it to staff to see if that's a good recommendation to have it 10 feet wide. The location where you're connecting to the sidewalk that already exists. Yes, exactly. I think it should be a better connection there. If we have I'm not assuming, I'm sure that it's going to be ADA compliance. So I think that turn is pretty rough. So I don't know if you can change it and smooth it or something to connect to that existing sidewalk in a better way. Then I see that the public amenity that you have on the east side of the access point, yes, there. I see that the only access to that amenity area is from your access point, meaning that if people are on the sidewalk and they want to use that public space, they are going to be discouraged to coming to a private property and then accessing the public road. I would certainly recommend that you have a direct access from that amenity public area to the sidewalk. So it's going to be inviting to the public walking there to come and use the public amenity. I think this design is kind of discourages people to using that from outside. Then is coming to the intersection. I don't see any crossing to the north. Yes, right there. So I don't know if there is any plan to make that crossing. I don't know if there is a pedestrian crossing here. Is it? Do you know? Well, I mean pedestrian crossing, but pedestrian signal.
There's definitely
there
a
a
signal
signal?
there, and a pedestrian. It's a pedestrian. There's a signal there. There's a safety island in the middle, and there is a pedestrian crosswalk going over to the station.
But there is no pedestrian signal, is it?
There is a pedestrian. It's a lighted intersection with a push button crosswalk.
Okay, great. Okay, I think staff should take a very good look at this intersection and providing some sort of crossing to the north. Then I think well, for now, that's for now. Those are all my questions and comments.
So this is Ethan. I'm gonna jump in here because I think my really only comment it is sort of piggybacking on the last two of my colleagues here, which is in regards to the Muse in the front park. As you know, the intention of the TOD district within the design manual is to encourage pedestrian and bike connections. And I really see this whole front of the project being dominated by an automobile to the tune where you have 1,500 parking spaces plus within the site, which makes this Muse into a street. It's not a pedestrian Muse. It is completely an automobile centric street. You're bringing deliveries to the back, and I think there's potentially a lost opportunity here. David, I noted in your process sketches, which I'm really appreciative of you showing those, that you had a street in a couple of the schemes to the southwestern edge of the site and bringing in cars kind of from the back. And I think that's a strategy that could be really beneficial to this, and maybe not take the car completely out of the that front plaza park area, but minimize its presence and really create that service to the back, right? And get whatever it might be, 75% of those 1,600 cars out of the pedestrian Muse, and give that back to the residents, and then really drive that to encourage pedestrian and bike traffic between here and the Dorsey station. And really, grab a hold of the intent of what that TOD development is. Architecturally speaking, I don't have any comments. I think you're on par. You have a really great looking building, really difficult site. I recognize that, and I think that would be my really only comment that I have.
Yeah. So being the other architect on the panel here, I agree with my colleagues. I think the only thing that seems, thank you. That's perfect. That's the drawing I was curious about. And I know somebody mentioned it, and I assume at some point you're going to be doing it if you haven't already done it. Architecture-wise, I think it's a very nice project, and I think it's a very difficult site, as Ethan said, and you've done a pretty decent job solving, or at least developing a solution. I agree with the comments that Ethan made, and one of the things I wanted to ask was, have you all done a traffic study? Because with one way in and one way out, and what appears to be that one entry being maybe 200 feet from a major intersection, and the potential of there's 600 units here, so potentially maybe as many as double that cars wise coming in and out of one ingress and path. deliveries, all the other things. Did you study, a through street of some type? Because I'm really concerned with your traffic flow, the amount of cars. And I agree with Ethan. I wish the Muse could be more about a pedestrian experience as opposed to just what it seems to be is going to be an automobile experience. My last question is, sorry I was late, but I'm assuming you have no retail at the ground floor. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So all of those units are going to be literally looking out onto that street with a, what probably is not going to be very much of a pedestrian experience. But big concern I have is that many cars with one way in, one way out, and you're only about 200 feet from that intersection. You're probably going to want to do a traffic study and take a harder look at this.
This is Mike, right? So that's required in the next step, which is the
Yep.
plan. So
Yep.
we're doing it now, and the location is in line with the existing one that's serving office buildings.
How many do you have any idea in terms of how many cars they were dealing with before, Mike, versus what you're going to be dealing with now?
I don't. I think that's
Yeah.
coming in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and one of the things we ran into in a number of these projects too, and I can tell you, I live next to an easement that was just put in a couple of years ago to access two houses, and the amount of trips that goes down that one driveway for two homes between FedEx, Amazon, U.S. Postal Service, and UPS, two homes is incredible. I mean, each one of those vehicles sometimes do 2 trips a day down that driveway. And here you're talking about 600 units. So I think it needs to be looked at. And I also agree with my colleagues, you got to provide opportunities for them to pull off somewhere. So they park their vehicle for 5, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and then they go make all their deliveries, Otherwise, you're going to have a real bottleneck potentially on the one way in and one way out of this entire neighborhood.
Just to add to that, for 600 units, you're going to have about 180 to 200 cars during the peak hours trying to get in and out. Most of them getting out in the morning, and 60-70% of them trying to get in the evening. So that access point with the parking along it that you show there without turning lanes is not gonna work. But I'm sure your traffic consultant is gonna work on that. So it is not gonna be an easy way of in and out in one axis with about 180 to 200 cars during the peak hours coming in and out.
So aside from Mike, those comments I had, I think you've got a pretty decent solution to what I agree with Ethan. It's a tough site, but architecturally it looks like a nice project.
Yeah, thank you. Our hope is that we can take advantage of that MARC station that's in walking distance across the street to produce numbers.
Yeah, that's the hope. The thing is, we're also wedded to our cars. It's really difficult to get people away from that, and especially when you're providing the ability for them to have them, so yeah.
I was wondering, just kind of going on some of the topics we've been talking about, if there could be a little kind of history of how the parking garage in one of the early sketches for the south building was along the railroad track, and what kind of led to it getting rotated up along the tree buffer that would be probably more beneficial for the residents than being right against the CSX tracks. What led to that kind of evolution?
Right. Yeah, I can kind of address some of those. So one of the challenges was with the parking garage itself. We needed to make sure that we could not overcompensate for parking. So the rotation here actually allowed us to provide the fire truck turning radius, which we show in the current plan. And also we're capable of yielding a little bit more units by this rotation and location. I don't disagree with you, but one of the primary goals here was to meet the unit count that we had to reach.
And Kelly, the other point I think, Dave, that you and I talked about, I think you made a good point, was the fact that this parking deck then now faces the other MARC parking commuter station across the street.
Right. It's just kind of a shame to give the tree buffer to the cars, and then it seems to result in a little odd bit of an L in that layout. That was one thing architecturally that when I was looking at the renderings, you have your primary entrance at that outboard corner, but then you have this very prominent other corner component that seem to be competing as you're highlighting both corners. So how do you, as a visitor coming to look at this place or drop off deliveries, know which corner to kind of get to when they both have very similar architectural styles? Just the kind of that whole move of moving the garage seemed to push this odd little appendage.
Kelly, could you repeat a little bit of that? It was kind of hard to understand. You were saying that the two corners were competing against each other?
Yeah, so if you're looking at this slide, that south building, the corner right at the beginning of the Muse that's where you're having your main building entrance, correct, based on your diagrams?
That's correct, yes.
That's the pink area that was on those. And then you have the outboard kind of L shape to the right of that is just kind of more additional units. But you're treating both the corners as those prominent elements per the design guides. It's kind of a little confusing, I think, if you're coming up on the streetscape to say, oh, this is a prominent corner, that must be the entrance because it's the first one I get to in that building.
Yeah, I hear your thought there, and I can respond to a little bit of that. One of the reasons why the lobby and entrance is located in its location is so there can be an amenity connection from the lobby to the courtyard. Yeah. Where if we have it on that tail end, it's kind of a little bit long distance to connect that marketing path.
Yeah, I agree, and that's kind of where I'm just going, is that appendage seems to be forcing a couple of odd moments.
Okay.
That maybe want to be considered a little bit stronger.
Sure.
And I feel like that got pushed by moving the garage as well. And then just kind of a smaller item is, how is trash being handled?
So where we have our loading areas identified, services and loading services would happen in that corner, right where Lydia's highlighting the back left, and then off of the turnaround right there, correct. So we try to tuck them away kind of to the least kind of exposed area of the project.
So they'll be kind of inboard to the buildings. There's not like exterior dumpster.
Yeah, everything at this point. Yeah, everything is expected to be inbound to the building. We don't want to have any exposed dumpsters or staging areas on the outside. That's the goals.
And as that relates to the comment I made about a street per one of your earlier schemes along that southwestern edge of the site, was there a reason you moved away from that? Because again, we're pulling trash trucks back there as well, right? So
sure.
So was there a reason you moved away from that? And I'd be interested to hear that.
Absolutely, you make a valid point, Ethan, and it's definitely something we'd like to study. But it was really just a move to help support the yields of the unit count that we were looking to achieve. But definitely something that we would be continuing to be interested in studying.
Architecture-wise, one question I had looking at, you can look at this plan, or it's the elevation that shows the north parking deck. That is facing apartments across the Muse. What's the architectural treatment to address things like headlights? I lived in the Fells Point right across from a parking garage for a long time, so something that is a consideration.
Right. So you're referring to in this elevation, the top where the garage is, and people coming out from the parking garage. What's the intention? And we would probably look a little bit toward the landscaping experiences to how we can help with the headlights, but definitely something we will continue to study.
And even on the upper decks, because you can see those as people swing around. It'll potentially shoot right into someone's apartment.
Yeah, we don't want to have. We want to have a vehicle barrier that's high enough to help block any vehicular lights. It's always a little challenge to that, but definitely something that is sensitive, and we continue to look into it.
Okay.
So are there any more comments from the panel?
Did Bob want to weigh in? I know Bob is here.
He wants us to know the height of the ceilings.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was also late. I had trouble getting in, but I would really like to see a landscape plan. I mean, I know we're only an advisory panel, but well, I'd like you to submit a landscape plan to DAP that they send to us to look at. And I agree with most everyone else on the panel. I think we've got real issues with circulation and traffic. There's a whole lot of units on a dead end. I don't know how you solve that without losing units. I think it's an issue. But that's not our charge, just my comment.
I agree with Bob. I think the layout of the buildings and circulations are not very desirable, and it should be looked at again.
So would you all on the panel be comfortable with addressing these through motions, or is there a requirement to bring this back to the panel?
If we're doing motions, I'd like to make a motion that the applicant submit a landscape plan for the DAP review.
And I guess my question to that, from a procedural standpoint, is we don't really have informal review, right? It's either we come back in front of the panel or it goes to planning and we make our advice to planning. So I'm not sure how to best handle that.
I think Anthony, they could submit a landscape plan and you could send it out to us for comment. I don't know exactly how this works. I mean, we're just an advisory group. We have strong opinions, but we can't.
I hear you. This is Mike. Anthony, I'd look to you for a little guidance and assistance. There is a DAP checklist that we followed and met and submitted. Certainly that, we could, work.
If you let me jump in, right? We have sent materials, landscape plans have been requested before. We have sent those to the panel for comments as they've requested. So we have certainly done that before. If it's something the panel would like to move forward with, we are happy to do that. Interested in the other motions that may come out as well.
Yeah, we just think it should be a requirement, but it's not. I don't know why it's not, but it's not.
We can look into that as well.
Yeah, and I agree because this is our only chance to comment on the landscape, really, unless we ask you to come back. And so we have no idea of the tree varieties you're putting in, or really even the design, because it's so conceptual at this point. So I feel like we're being not doing due diligence by being able to comment on it. It'll go forth, and it may not be commented on by anybody else. So we wanted to have an opportunity to do that. And I agree with Bob. I wish we did have it as a requirement that we actually see the landscape palette and the types of trees and shrubs and perennials that you're using.
So Bob, could you be able to see it at SDP as well? I mean, there's the more detailed piece that I think you're probably seeking would be at the SDP stage. I believe DAP has purview at SDP as well. We can certainly look into that. I don't know how it's been exercised, but we can look into that as well.
Okay. Well, are we going to do motions then, or?
Yeah, why don't we address that as a motion? Either you or Bob.
Go ahead, Larry.
So I'd like to make the motion that the applicant develop a detailed landscape plan that would go along with SDP approval. Is that what you're saying, Anthony?
What I'm suggesting is that the DAP may have authority to re-review the project when it comes in at the SDP level, which is the more sort of detailed building and site and landscape portion of the plan. I mean, they're very early now. They're at sketch. They're about to submit a sketch plan. They have to work through subdivision and then get to the site development plan.
Okay, so I don't know how to make that motion. Can you do it, Bob?
I don't know either. uh, I don't know.
Why don't we make a motion that it comes back with landscape plan and some maybe better circulation, some of the concerns and questions that we have had to be addressed at the next meeting, instead of making a motion about just one thing. For me, there are several questions. It's not just the landscaping, but landscaping is very important, and I think we should have that. But I think other issues that we have all raised should be looked at. I understand we are advisory committee and we are not, making a decision here. But if you want our opinion, then I think we should have a better layout of the buildings and circulations and landscaping and all of that.
I think it all goes back to that everyone's concerned about the Muse and the way it's being utilized, the traffic and all that. And I think it was
Exactly.
Ethan that made the comment to have you studied, or maybe one of the concepts showed, a southwest circulation route where the vehicular traffic was kind of kept in that corridor so that the Muse could truly become more pedestrian oriented. So the landscape plans all depended on that, as to whether the building locations shift a bit in order to accommodate that.
Yes, but I think we making all the loading and unloading and trash and everything at the end of the buildings without really another way out, that one street between the buildings are going to handle hundreds of traffic plus all these trucks and everything that is going back there. It is not going to be very
Suggestion. I mean, we are an
efficient
advisory panel.
circulation.
Everybody, we are an advisory panel. We should be making motions. Let it go back to the Department of Planning and Zoning. If we really want to see the project again, then we say so.
Okay.
We just want to make motions, I mean, they're going to have to meet all this criteria well far and above all of the things that we review here. They've still got to do a traffic study. There's many things that they've got to consider.
Thank you, Fred. I would support handling this through motions personally.
I would agree, Ethan.
Okay.
You want to make a motion?
Bob, I'll take a stab at making your motion, which will say the applicants submit a landscape plan to the design advisory panel, which may include review, not now, but at the SDP phase.
I'll second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'd like to make a motion that the applicant consider alternate vehicular patterns that would really celebrate the pedestrian aspects of a TOD development by opening up and promoting that through the Muse and the front park, potentially including the addition of a street to the south.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then I'd like to make a motion strictly dealing with the public park that the applicant take into consideration adding more active type of recreation to that park and a direct connection to the outside walkway system.
I'll second that.
Second it.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Our job here is to help you have a great project. And I think the motions that we've talked about will do that. I know it's a tough site and a tough problem, but we're here to help you as much as to do the right thing by the county.
Are there any other motions by the panel?
No.
And so I think we're done. We can call it. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure thing. Thanks a lot, everyone, for your comments and time tonight. Forward to work with you. Thanks.
Anthony, anything else on the schedule?
That's it for the schedule. The next meeting, Nick, there are no items for the next meeting, correct?
Correct. The next available meeting is the 1st in June. The submission deadline for that is next week. I have one prospective project. It remains to be seen if it's going to be ready in time, but I will keep the panel apprised if we do receive a submission from me next week. So I'll keep you guys in the loop, let you guys know if it's ready to go.
We'd like to welcome our new members.
Yeah, same from me there, Sharir and Kelly. It's great to have you on board, and sorry I was late joining in and wasn't able to introduce myself to you.
Too.
Yeah, me too. And actually,
you.
Anthony, I did have to cut and paste a password in that was in the email that came from Nick. So it's odd because normally when you guys send an invite and I put it in my calendar, I can just click on it and I come right in. It was very difficult. I don't know what changed.
That's
Web
very
activity
strange.
work.
It seemed to be different people had different login situations. It's through their new webinar setup. They discontinued the old way and are doing it now through this webinar setup.
Okay.
So hopefully now that you've logged in once, maybe there's memory in the computer that will remember the router, or I don't know if the cache needs.
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know if it's a different password every meeting. So you have to scroll down in the email and you'll see there's a password in there if you're doing video or if you're doing just mobile. And then I just cut and pasted it and it worked.
Okay, that's good.
I had the same thing, Brad.
Likewise.
Yeah.
I send my reminders because I usually send you guys a reminder usually the day before and day of. I'll make sure I get the passwords and copy them in the email so you guys have both the link, a fresh link, and everything you need to log in. The next go around,
It took me
center, so we don't have any more hiccups.
Yeah, it took me 2 years to get into the other system smoothly, and now they go change it. So.
And please don't,
Larry, I've never been able to get in smoothly until tonight. So,
well, you're definitely.
But I use the password.
Nick and Anthony, don't send the invitations out 4 weeks ahead of time. I lose them.
Well, hey, Bob, the idea is you put it in your calendar.
Yeah, thank you for sending it.
I don't even know what my calendar
Yeah,
is.
you have to, because otherwise I won't be able to make a lot of them. I have to plan around it.
Yeah, I think you just accept the invitation. It automatically goes to the calendar. Anyway, well, it's good to see everybody, and we'll just wait to hear when the next one is.
See y'all later.
Good night.
Have a good night. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Night.